Hello, I'm Dan Reed from WXPN in Philadelphia, and I have with me in our studios today Steve Wynn, who has just released his first memoir. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true, a memoir of life, music, and the Dream Syndicate. I'm holding it up here, Jawbone Book, the publisher. And SteveWynn.net, by the way, is sort of a clearinghouse for everything Steve Wynn, but also info on the book. So thanks for coming in.
Oh, pleasure to be here with you.
Good to see you. We have talked many times over the years, and I wanted to first, as I told you, I wanted to thank you for the book. I really, really enjoyed it, and as I mentioned on the air yesterday, he was live on the air with me here in Philly. I read a ton of rock bios. I just love it. And this is one of my favorites ever. It was so honest and very well done. So you should be proud.
Oh, thanks so much.
What made you want to write this book, this memoir?
Well, something I say at the end of the book in the acknowledgments is I always wanted to have written a book. Writing one was a different story because, writing a book takes time.
A little more involved, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been writing songs my whole life, and I've written, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of songs, whatever. My favorite songs I've written took 10 minutes to write. You can write a song that fast. You can't write a book in 10 minutes, no matter how on top of it you are, no matter how fast you type.
Maybe a haiku, but...
Maybe a haiku, right. That's about it.
Yeah,
so, I always had the idea, but the fact of the matter is I tour all the time, I record all the time, I stay busy. I'm not the kind of guy who can write a book in the back seat of a bus or a van or something like that. So it never didn't happen. And finally... through a series of events, just before the pandemic, I started kind of making tracks on it. And then when that hit, I had all the time in the world, so I hunkered down and got it done.
Did you sit down every day and say, I'm going to write for an hour or two a day, or did you just write when you got the inspiration?
Having never done that, and I really, I've made a bunch of records, but I had never written a book, so I didn't know how you go about it. And it was kind of a daunting thing. And do you sit down for an hour a day, whatever. And I'd heard people say the way to write a book is to say you're going to write 100 words a day or 500 words a day. And don't worry about it, just blaze through. Have a word count you want to hit and just do it. Like, okay. So I said 500, would be great. Well, as it turned out, once I started doing it, I was writing about 3,000 a day.
Yeah.
Because I was really into it. It actually was not as difficult or intimidating as I thought. And I didn't know if it would be a chronological story, if it would be a series of essays, so I just started at the beginning. And it's funny you talk about rock memoirs, because I'm a fan also.
Right.
And I've read a bunch. We're both big music fans.
You have a couple favorites?
Your colleague Jim McGuinn asked me that last night at the show, and I had to think for a second. And I said the obvious because it's so great. Chronicles by Bob Dylan. It's as masterful a book as his best songs are at songwriting. But I have other ones too. The Sly Stone book that came out last year.
I haven't read that. It's good.
Oh
yeah, I bet. What a story, huh?
It's beyond belief.
Yeah.
It's kind of a major miracle, considering how he's disappeared from public view and all the thoughts of is he still active or where's his mind at these days. It's not only detailed and giving you all the facts and stories you want to hear. It's really funny. He has a great sense of humor and perspective and wordplay. So I like that one a lot.
And former DJ as well.
Former DJ, former record producer. So he has a lot of perspective on things. But I guess the finish of the thing is just that I when I read the rock memoirs, a lot of times I'll skip through the childhood stuff. In fact, if some guys show, like everybody has a childhood. Come on, you played jacks on the schoolyard. You did this, you did that. And I thought I'd do the same with my book. But I found when I was writing this, that the story I wanted to tell really did tie in a lot to how I discovered music as a kid.
Right.
And I realized once I started that's going to be the theme of the book. Right. It's not going to be my sordid tales in rock and roll or all the people I dated.
There's a little bit of that in there, though.
There's a little bit of sordid stuff and a little bit of love life, but it's mostly about a love of music and how it translated to writing songs and being in a band and how that takes you through life.
Lou Reed, A Life by Anthony DeCurtis. Did you read that one?
Yes, great book.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I like the one that came out a couple of years ago, too, the Will Hermes book. I thought was
I haven't read that one yet.
Really good.
I have to check that one out. Now, did you take, throughout your life and career, I mean, obviously as a child you probably didn't do this, but once you got into music big time, have you kept detailed notes on what happened when, or is this a lot of this from memory that you wrote?
All memory.
That's crazy, man.
All memory. And that's another reason I decided I wanted to get this done, because who knows? You know, you just, well, let's not get morbid, but you don't know if you'll remember stuff, if something might happen. And there are a lot of good stories to tell. And they're all in my memory. The funny thing is, I just wrote them from memory. No notes, no, I should need to get to that or what happened there. But once I wrote the book, I sent it out to people who were there.
Right.
I ran it by Dennis Duck, the drummer from the Dream Syndicate. I ran it by Peter Buck, of course, REM and my bandmate in the Baseball Project, Vicki Peterson from the Bengals.
Right.
People, friends of mine who were there and said, let me know if I got something wrong. And they all came back and said, first of all, there's nothing that sounds wrong. And second of all, how do you remember all this stuff?
All this? That's what I would be thinking.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And,
have you heard from anybody about this was wrong that's read the book?
No, not yet.
That's pretty amazing.
I said that with some hesitancy because there are a couple train spotters out there who have said, well, actually, the Big Star double record reissue was on Stax and not on Line Records. That was one big one. I said, duly noted. I'll change. Okay. I'll change that one.
That in the
and that stuff matters to me, by the way. So okay.
In the second edition.
The funny thing is, I'll tell you something, because I really did. It went through a lot of hands, including the editors at Jawbone Press, who put this out, the UK public.
Right.
And they had a great editor there who had done a lot of books. They're great company, by the way.
Yeah.
And it went through a lot of hands. At the very end, it came to the point where they said, "Can you get some people to write the blurbs of the back cover?"
Right.
Get some of your big name pals to chip in. It's like, all right,
And you did.
And I did. So I got Lenny Kaye and Peter Buck and Vicky and there was a fourth. David Frick. So some good names. I approached my friend and great musician Ira Kaplan, and he's in the book and he's in some of the stories.
Right.
Now I almost hate to say this, but I say it in the book. I approached Ira with the thing. I said, Ira, if you have time, maybe could you write a couple sentences? And Ira said, yes, but are you done with the edit yet? I said, why? And Ira said, well, there are a couple things you may have gotten wrong here if you want to hear about it. I said, lay it on me, buddy. I'm not done yet.
Oh, wow.
Ira, besides being, Mr. Yellow Tank and all that, he was a rock critic and a
Trouser Press.
Exactly. Yeah. Trouser Press,
Right.
New York Rocker.
Right, New York Rocker.
He was, in fact, a sound man at some of the earliest Dream Syndicate shows.
Sure.
He did a lot of things. And he was a copy editor, which I didn't know.
Ah.
So he dove in and he found things that just kind of horrified me. For example, Mickey Dolenz is in the book.
Yeah.
He said, Steve, Mickey is M-I-C-K-Y. There's no E. I went,
That's
oh
true.
my God, I would have gone to press misspelling Mickey Dolenz.
Dolenz' name.
And he did the same with Robbie Krieger of the Doors. R-O-B-B-Y, no I-E.
I always thought it was I.E.
Well, there you go. You knew.
I know.
We all need Ira Kaplan.
Right, that's right.
And he also found a little stylistic things. So he was the final one, and I'm grateful for what he helped with.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he has a great memory as well. Just by.
Yeah, and I think there's a guy who should write a book, but he has no interest.
True.
Yeah.
He's had an interesting life.
As of yet.
The book starts at childhood. It goes up through the initial breakup of the Dream Syndicate in the early 90s, I guess it was. You were born February 21st, 1960 in Los Angeles. You were an only child.
Yeah.
Your book tells a lot about, well, first of all, I want to ask you, did you consider your childhood, your upbringing, would you say you grew up in a progressive household or households, I guess?
Households,
question?
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, progressive, and I think you mean like as far as wild 60s, rock and roll kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, permissive more than progressive, and in that my mother, I was raised for most of my first 9 years by my mother, only child to a single working mother,
right.
and just by the nature of her life, look, she was 20 years old when she had me.
Yeah.
And which blows my mind. That's so young.
It is.
And she was out there just trying to put food on the table, so I had a lot of free reign. And it was a great time to be able to do that. She actually has read the book, and she's alive and doing great. And she read the book and said, I didn't let you do all that stuff. I said, yes, you did. And I'm so grateful because that's gave me the freedom to go to record stores when I was 7, to discover music, to discover cities, to go wandering.
It became one of my favorite parts of the book because it really painted a picture in my head. You jumping on your bicycle at age 7, 8, 9, 10, and just going into Hollywood, going into L.A., finding record stores, just exploring. And you had friends. But you were kind of a loner for a while, right? You had your own little world that you lived in there.
Yeah, and I think being a loner helps you become a writer because you fill the empty space with stories, with your imagination. Not that a person with 20 siblings couldn't write books or write things, but for me, that was how my songs, my writing, and my love of music was my friends. Now, I make it sound like I was all alone, but the thing about my childhood, as far as being progressive, is my parents got divorced when I was very young. Stayed friends until my father died. They were
their relationship was good after the divorce.
It was I like to say it was a bloodless coup when they broke up. They just parted. Yeah. But my father, you talk about progressive. My father was kind of, shall we say, a swinger back in the 60s, and he had the wilder life, and I'd be seeing him on weekends. And my mother was, well, certainly not conservative, but because she's responsible, she had to take care of things. She couldn't afford to be the playgirl to his playboy, and so she had things to do. But at the same time, my father had 2 daughters from a previous marriage, and the younger sister, the younger of the daughters, my younger half sister, Lindy, knew how much I love music, and she loved music. She would take me to all the rock shows I would see as a kid. So here I am, 9 years old. The first concert I ever saw was Delaney and Bonnie. Like what a cool first show to see. I know we talked about your first show, and by the way, the Banana Splits is a hell of a first show. So
I don't know, man.
You got to see these great stuffed animals singing Tra La La, and I saw the Derek and the Dominoes backing band.
That's right.
So to each his own, man.
Yeah, I know. Should have opened up for Banana Splits then.
That would have been hell of a The Monkees opened up for Jimi Hendrix, so things.
Yeah, you say in your book, if I'm quoting you correctly, that you feel like you were born at the right time. Do you mean, obviously, I took that to mean musically, but do you think socially as well, and just the way the world was growing up in LA in the 60s, you feel that way?
Probably both, yeah. I mean, music.
So you're not. I've taken from this book that you're perfectly satisfied with the time you grew up and the times you came of age. It seemed to be right for you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Besides, wouldn't be bad to be 25 years old again right now. But
yeah.
But no. Yes, it was kind of a perfect time because look, I was born in 1960. I'm 4 years old when the Beatles hit.
Yeah.
And just taking it in with wide-eyed wonder. In a time AM radio at that time meant you're listening to Cream and Hendrix, next
Motown,
to Motown,
right,
and that's on the radio.
Right.
It's on your transistor radio.
Right.
I'm taking that on. I'm hearing the Beatles' career unfold in real time, being devastated when they broke up. All these things, and then I get the double whammy, and that's what got me into music and made me want to write songs. But then the double input of turning 17, getting my first taste of freedom, moving out of the house, that excitement at the same year the punk rock broke.
Right?
Like, oh my God, what a soundtrack to Going Wild. And so all these things in my life made it very easy and exciting to be a music fan.
You were, and we talked about this briefly yesterday, but I also feel like you were you got pretty musically sophisticated very young. I mean, I think the first record you said you bought with your own allowance money was Willie and the Poor Boys by CCR, and of course they were an AM band. But there's a big jump between the Banana Splits and the Monkees and CCR, I think. And going to shows like Delaney and Bonnie and other shows you saw, you describe, you talk about the year 1969. Which I was 8, you were 9, you're a year older than I was. And 1969 meant to me that we got to stay up late and watch Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, and the New York Mets win the Miracle Mets win the World Series.
Sounds good so far.
Yeah. But to you, it was going to these concerts and sitting with these older people because of your stepsister there, and going to record stores by yourself and discovering all this stuff. I know it seems natural to you because you lived through it, but do you realize now how advanced that was at that young age?
Yes. It blows my mind. And you talk about progressive and permissive and the era of the cultural time. Look, first of all, California, and specifically LA in the 70s, was quite a place.
I'm sure.
You see movies like Shampoo, with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's and then plenty of other documentations. It was a wild, freewheeling, swinging kind of place, and it was fun for me. Not that I was at 12 living like Warren Beatty, but but I was surrounded by this kind of. So for example, my sister.
You walked through a few shag carpets in your time,
and I saw things. Let's say my sister, who's fabulous, and we, she again also loves the book, but
oh, good.
But she would take me to these shows, these rock shows, and I'm talking, seeing Led Zeppelin and Alice Cooper and The Who and whatever, always. By the way, she wasn't taking me to see the Stooges because I wasn't old enough to go to
a bar
club,
right.
But I would go to all the arena shows and all
Civic
that
centers and stuff.
And then after the shows, I'd go back to her pad, and she said, well, I'll take Steve for the night, and he'll stay at my place. And she and her friends would be smoking weed and playing records till 3 a.m. And I wasn't, for whatever reason, I didn't take on that side of thing. I wasn't, at that age at least, things changed. But at that age, I wasn't into so much the getting high and, being flirting with, whatever. But if it had music, I wanted to know about it.
I understand.
So when her friends were up playing records till 3 a.m, I was in heaven. I'd see, I don't know what's going on there and who's doing what, but they're putting on, Quadrophenia, and I'm down for that.
You're going to listen to that.
I'm going to listen to that.
Right, exactly. 1969, I think that's the year you got your guitar and wrote your first song and started a band and all that. But also, you mentioned L.A. in the 70s, but also that year of 69, you talk about, it was frightening to me. I think it would be the Manson, the Tate LaBianca murders, the Charles Manson thing was happening not far from where you were living at that time. And there was a lot of, and like I said, I think you were very culturally astute at a young age, what was going on in the world. And I'm sure you were part of that in the news too. I seemed, myself, I seemed a little more removed from all of that being in middle America, but you were in LA when a lot of stuff was going on. But that story about the Manson thing going on, that haunted you as a child, though, didn't it? That was scary.
Yeah, it was, because Alex said my mother married up and divorced down, and we
you went up to the hills.
Yeah,
right.
we grew up in a lower middle class kind of small 2-bedroom apartment, and then she married a guy with a little bit of money when I was 9, and we moved up to Bel Air,
right. Up in the hills a little more.
I'm not saying it wasn't a mansion world, but it was a very different kind of life.
Sure.
But the weird thing about that was, besides I hated it because I couldn't bike to record stores anymore, or I could with great difficulty.
Well, I love the story. You were like, the ride down to Hollywood was fun, but going back up. I think you called the ride down the hill was harrowing and scary, and the ride
straight
up
down.
was just like you had to walk your bike almost the whole way because it was straight up those hills. Right?
Holding my copy of the new Kinks record while I'm pushing the bike up the hill. But we moved up there in the summer of '69, which
wow.
Yeah. Now this is, if I remember right, I think it was maybe July. The month or even weeks after we moved there were the Manson killings.
Yeah, right.
That happened one canyon over.
Right.
If you look at
it was like a mile away from you as the crow flies.
Yeah, down a hill and up a hill, kind of.
Yeah.
So, they say you become fascinated with the things that scare you the most. And I'm 9 years old. I'm scared, and I'm at this point. I've only lived in very city type areas, no hills, no green, no nothing, just buildings and stuff like that. And now I'm surrounded by canyons, and I'm hearing sounds outside the window I've never heard before. And I think, they're coming.
They're coming for me.
They're coming.
Sure.
And I think that, besides being fascinating, and I've proceeded to read so many crime books and crime novels and follow news about that, and anything I could read about that particular incident, I would read. And that definitely influenced a lot of my writing, because I just became, from that point, at that age, very obsessed with the darker side of things and darker sides of people.
And back then, you could go to the newsstand and get the True Detective magazines and all those shock things.
And it was things on TV, too.
Right. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
You, so you've got a guitar. You're playing the guitar. You're forming these little bands and playing around, and you're writing songs. And then you went to, I wonder if you could describe your time, first time away from home, going to the Jewish summer camp experience. I thought that was a pretty pivotal time for you. It seemed like it was.
Yeah, that was a thing that the kids. I think the summer camp thing was a popular thing, and definitely among Jewish kids at the time. And my folks, they probably liked a little bit of freedom too. But they sent me away for a month at a time to these camps, sleepaway camp kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was. I've always been drawn to things where I had the freedom to explore. I still do. It's why I love touring so much, because I can be in different cities and wander around a new city. And last night before my show here in Philly, I know not last night for the sake of accuracy, but when I played in Philly, as I often do, up until showtime, I just walked around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Sure,
right.
that's my I like that. So going away to a camp where I could be away from my folks and kind of wander on my own really suited me.
Yeah, and you took your guitar and you were playing songs, and then girls were taking notice, and
they were
all that. That's
how about that?
How about that?
Yeah, and it was kind of a thing. It's like that. I realized that it wasn't just playing guitar, but that I wrote songs, and that fascinated them.
Right.
Yeah, they'd say,
Most people
come over to the girls' cabin and play us your new song. I was like, well, sure, why not?
I think it's when you realize most people can't do this. Mm-hmm. And most people can't do that, and I think that's the wondrous thing about writing songs. But you write that at age 14, I'm quoting you here from your book. My interest and focus and obsession shifted from music to sports. What I find fascinating about that is most of the time, it's the 9-year-olds who are obsessed with sports, and then they move to rock and roll when they get into their teenage years.
Right.
You sort of did a reverse thing. Now, you've always been a sports fan, but you really became a big baseball fan in your teenage years. You were, of course, you were surrounded. I mean, you were in Los Angeles at that point, so the Dodgers were there. Mm-hmm. You saw some good baseball, I'm sure, during your youth. But what do you think? What did click there? Because you sort of just dropped your guitar and let it be. You left it in the case, and you said, instead, I'm going to maybe I could write about sports. I mean, maybe that might be my vocation. And you took that very seriously in your teenage years for like 3 years there. That's what you did. But what did click there for you? What was it?
In the course of writing the book, a lot of things I never thought about, I had to figure out, things like that.
Yeah.
Because it did, and it was strange, because I still loved music. It wasn't like I said, I'm done with music. I think that what happened was, first of all, I have to say, I wasn't a big sports fan growing up before that.
Okay.
Not at all. Never played, didn't follow it. Best I can figure is I had my best friend who also loved music as well at that time. His father was the manager of KFWB, the big news station in L.A., he was the general manager, and he had these great seats at Dodger Stadium.
Oh, you got tickets, yeah?
Yeah, behind the dugout.
Wow, nice.
And there's maybe they don't have those seats anymore, but there'd be about 16 of you down there, and you had the concession stand to yourself. Like, well, this is great. I can walk, get a hot dog, and walk back. And I think maybe that's when baseball clicked for me. But also, again, as far as the chronology of my life, when I turned 13, 14. Sure, there was great music being made. And now, in retrospect, I can look back and say, oh, yeah, well, the Roxy music was happening, and the New York Dolls were happening, and things like that. But really, it was kind of a dry period for the music that excited me.
Well, especially for mainstream listeners. I mean, what you heard on the radio and such, yeah, right.
Yeah. And there would be bands I liked and would pick up on, but at the same time, the idea of being in a band and playing music, I didn't want to be Yes or Genesis or ELP. I didn't want to be, this kind of a... this is a kind of music I wasn't into, and it seemed that's where things were going. Yeah. So I think it's around the time I stopped wanting to play in bands, and that's why I quit for a while. And I was always a writer. That's the first thing. I was talking to somebody at a show recently, and they were talking about songwriting and guitar playing and singing and the things I do, and I said, I've learned on the fly to be a better guitarist. I've definitely learned on the fly to be a singer because I wasn't that early on, but writing I've always done, and so. Whether it's writing a book or sports writing.
Right.
And once I realized I could write about sports, and I'll tell you something, that the way I wanted to write about sports wasn't just, something out of a Preston Sturges movie or whatever, with the we're going to copy that, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm done. I can, but that kind of cut and dry sort of thing. I wanted it to be sort of personality and fun, and that wasn't so much of a sports writing thing back then. There was.
Was there a certain sports writer that you really liked?
There was one, Jim Murray for the LA Times.
Jim Murray, of course, for him. Yeah.
So I'd read him, and I liked his kind of flowery and interpretive way he would handle sports, and that's what I wanted to do. But it was not.
Was he the guy on the Dodgers beat at that time? You think, or
everything for the LA Times?
Oh, okay.
So he would He would write about any sports.
Okay, I got you.
Dodgers, Knicks. I'm a New Yorker now.
Lakers.
Sorry, Lakers, Rams, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't the norm. I read The Athletic now, and I love what they did. Had The Athletic been around back then,
that's what you would have wanted to do.
I might have not become a musician because that was more the style I wanted to write. But it was appealing to me. I got to write, and I really went hook, line, and sinker into sports. it's really mystifying, like you say, that it would usually go the other way around. You know, as you know, here at XPN and all that, I played in a band called the Baseball Project.
Right.
And Peter Buck, my bandmate, is mystified. He said, you know, when I was young, you was one or the other. The people we
Sure.
hated the people who like sports.
Sure.
I get that. I just like both.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but while I was sports writing, I was still listening to music.
Yeah.
Still getting
Never-
turned on.
never went away.
Never went away. But the idea of playing it, of being in a band, didn't seem like as much fun. It just didn't seem, you know, had I been hip to something like the Dolls and the Stooges, I might have had a clue.
Right.
But no, it didn't excite me.
But that'll change soon enough. Is it true that you went to high school with the notorious Darby Crash, the front man of the Germs?
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the high school I went to, it's a public school. It's not a private school. Nothing fancy. It just happens to be where a lot of musicians and actors went to school.
And where was that? That was Hollywood?
West LA.
West LA.
Yeah, not far from UCLA, not far from
right.
you know
Westwood,
Santa
over
Monica,
there.
Westwood,
Right.
that
Yeah,
area
yeah.
called University High School. If you ever look up University High School alumni, which I'm proud to be on one they list.
Oh, very good.
It's crazy, from Darby Crash to Nels Cline to Kim Gordon, and going backwards. Robbie Krieger, John Densmore, and Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
Just, you know, it's over the top. I mean, I can't even begin to name all of them. But yes, at the time I was going to school there, I remember I had a Spanish class. I was studying Spanish. And for whatever reason, this kid would walk in the class every day, walk in the class with a boom box, or probably wasn't a boom box, but at that time it was a big cassette player. Or
Right. Yeah.
Cranking Aladdin Sane by David Bowie. And he'd walk in, and he looked like really a little different than everybody else. And he'd walk in the class, and the teacher would just be exasperated, and he'd walk out again. It was like singing out of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And the one day he walked in, and his hair was a little spikier,
Right.
and a little more unruly, and his clothes were a little more torn. And he walked in the class word, "Bowie is dead," and walked out again. And that was Darby Crash.
And that's punk rock, what he just did there.
That hello punk rock.
Hello, punk rock. You go to college. You go to University of California at Davis, and you go there and you get involved right away with the radio station, but more on the sports side, and also the newspaper as well. But your music, or your focus starts to shift back to music, because that's when you get turned on to punk rock at that point. Yeah.
And doing what you do, I became a DJ for 3 years.
That's right.
And I loved that. That was I went to school, I guess, to the reasons people go to school, to get an education and figure
Sure.
out your vocation and what you're going to do with your life. But I quickly ignored
changed,
that
yeah.
and excited by punk rock and by being a DJ and a little bit of music writing. I kind of gave up the sports writing. The second the Clash and the Buzzcocks enter the picture, sports writing goes out the window.
Pretty much
it's gone, very rapidly. But
yeah.
being in this, Davis, California, it's a small college town near Sacramento, but it's not the hotbed of hipsters. It actually, over the years, has had a few musicians there, but it's not like what you would call, there's no scene per se.
Sure, I know what you're saying.
And it was a great place to be, as opposed to LA, where I grew up, because the 30 or 40 people who were into it all knew each other, had no rules. There was no benchmark for what's cool and what's not cool. You didn't have to dress a certain way or listen to music and not this and that instead. You found your own way. And I was there at this school with a lot of people who end up being in bands. Scott Miller from Game Theory, Guy Kaiser from Thin White Rope, Russ Tolman and Gavin Blair, who were in True West when we had a band together, and Kendra Smith, who was my bandmate in the Dream Syndicate and went on to play in the band that led to Mazzy Star. We were all there, and we were all working at the radio station, and it was kind of funny, because when we came to the radio station, this station in 77, just, 17, 18-year-old kids, all full of beans. And the previous guard, the old hippies, who were all of 19, maybe 20.
Right, they seem so
They
ancient,
were
right?
into horrible hippie music, like get this, Can and Noy and Miles Davis.
Wow.
All the stuff I love now.
Yeah.
We said, that's got to go. If your song is longer than 3 minutes and doesn't have a distorted guitar, we don't want to know about it.
I remember that.
We took over the place.
I remember that feeling. Also, at UC Davis, you started making forays very often into San Francisco. So, you grew up in LA, then you got to experience what was going on in San Francisco. And it seems to me like one of the most important meetings that you've had in your life was Kendra Smith, who you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Became your bandmate, and I feel like, from reading the book, it feels like to me that you meeting her was the right person at the right time. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Completely. Okay. She was my ally, my best friend.
Yeah, right.
We just having the band together, learning about things together. And there were other people that are much less well known in that scene there who were very important to me too. I write about, people in LA would know about a guy named Tom Grasick, who was slightly older and worked at the station and turned me on to so much music. He was a roommate of mine. But Kendra was an ally just as far as being like me. We're
same age.
We're 3 weeks apart in age.
Right.
And we were learning in real time.
Yeah.
And even though Kendra, for those who know her and know of her reputation, Kendra being in the Dream Syndicate, quit early, being in the band that became As You Star, quit that band and became kind of a reclusive Syd Barrett-like hermit, although she's not like Syd Barrett.
Right.
She's become this very cool figure. But at that time, she was just fun-loving and up for anything and up for discovering music and going to shows. So we had a lot of fun together, and we would find out about things. So very important. And, of course, eventually forming a band that led to where I am today.
Right. And also, when you were at Davis, you needed some money too. So you get you've already been the college DJ. You became the PD of the radio station there at one point, and then you start.
Tough job.
Yeah. Then you start. You get a gig at a record store, which was something you came back to a few times in the next few years, including when your trip back to LA. So I mean, obviously, you and I think we can both. As well as you know me, I'm sure you can imagine that going to record stores as a young man was very important to me. I'm sure it was to you. I can't imagine. I would think that the coolest job in the world would be to work at a record store. So you were happy to get that first gig, I'm sure. Yeah, cool gig.
Oh, it's the coolest. And not the cool. The store in Davis was kind of a mainstream shop.
Yeah,
but still, I still was thrilled. Yeah. You'll appreciate this. This kind of store. You had a playlist that what you can play, and it wasn't the most adventurous playlist. And there were 3 records that I could even stand on the playlist. One was "Get the Knack," "Jesus Is Cool," Nick Lowe, and "The Cars" Candio. And we're talking 3 pretty mainstream things. But after that, it was straight down to Barbra Streisand, Journey, and so. But I did eventually work at the Rhino Record Store, and to me,
in LA, right.
I will say I've had a lot of great thrills in my life. I've had a blessed life and career, and so many stories which I tell in the book, and some which I happened after that I don't tell. And I've got to play giant festivals and play with people in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and make records that people love and blah blah. I might have been more thrilled to get that job at Rhino Records than anything that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That when that day happened, which was the coolest store in town.
Yes.
And when they hired me, and I said, "You got to be kidding! I'm going to stand behind that counter, the counter which I've stood on the other side of for my whole
and you're going to have cats like you come in and ask you questions about things. And I mean, what else?
You got to buy that DB's record. You got to buy that. Buy the Soft Boys.
What else would a music fanatic want to do than tell people what to listen to?
Come on.
That's why you're a DJ too, of course.
Well, it's funny you say that, Dan, because I feel like what you do as a DJ, what I did as a DJ, what a record store clerk does, is very similar to what musicians do, because of course, and what songwriters do, because. Not for everybody. A lot of people just want to be pop stars, and a lot of people just want to be DJs, on mainstream, But most of us love music so much that we want to turn people on to stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what bands do. That's what the Rolling Stones did. The Rolling Stones said, "We love Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and we want you to know about it, and we can't come to your house and play our records for you, so we're going to play in a band that will play this music."
Right.
And I think a lot of my approach to music, especially early on, came from that. I love this, and I want you to hear this music I love. So you may not get to see The Fall tonight, but I'm going to play a band that sounds enough like it to convey that feeling.
It's exciting to want to hear something that you want your colleagues also and your friends to hear. But it's also one of the biggest letdowns in the world when you play it for them and they're like, I don't know, man.
Oh, well, especially when you're younger,
especially when you're younger,
they don't remain your friends anymore.
You think they're crazy, right?
Yeah, it's like if somebody says, I liked combat rock more than Sandinista.
Yeah.
You're not my friend anymore.
Yeah.
I can't talk to you.
You and Kendra started a band that you called, I think, the Suspects at first. You play around. You actually, Steve, for a brand new band, going to San Francisco and getting to play and open up for that was kind of cool. But you come back to LA in 1980, and you transfer to UCLA.
Yeah.
You needed to get out of Davis. You come back here. Kendra follows very shortly.
Independently, but
Independently from you, very shortly thereafter. You're still way into music at this point. I really, if you could talk about your first foray back into that LA scene as a musician, you actually started going to open mic nights, right? And playing and
Sure.
jamming with people, right?
Yeah, to play music, you have to find your own way in. And LA was funny at that time. We talk about, again, the chronology of things being as they were. I went to Davis from 1977 to 1980. Again, figured that in the trajectory of punk rock. By then, most bands, the bigger bands had either made it into the mainstream or broken up. I came back to an LA punk rock scene that was dead. It was over. What had happened there had sort of dissipated and fallen into a lot of different scenes. Power pop, rockabilly, goth, the new punk rock, the hardcore scene.
Yeah.
It was not a united, exciting scene. So there wasn't a feeling like, here I am, where do I go to join up? It was just kind of a mess. And to be in a band wasn't that easy. And it was kind of dispiriting, because the music that was happening there at the time just didn't excite me. It wasn't that great. But I wanted to play. And so there was one club in particular that had kind of a fun open mic night. It was on Sunday nights.
Club 88.
Club 88.
Right.
Kind of a well-known club in LA at the time. You could go on Sunday night, and they would at the door have about 5 jars when you walk in. And the entrance fee was you would put $1. The jars would be marked singer, guitarist, bass player, drummer, keyboards. And you put $1 in your name into whatever you wanted to be part of that night. And they would pull your ticket or whatever it was out of there and form bands on the spot. Say, okay, this is a band. You have 5 minutes to come up with a name and the song you're going to play. And the winner of the battle of this bands would get all the money. The 26
you get all
bucks.
26 bucks.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. You get the jar out. That's how they did it. So they made their money off the drinks or whatever.
Right.
Kind of a cool gimmick, actually.
Yeah,
Some
it's kind
clubs
of
should do
fun,
that.
actually. Yeah.
So I would do that whenever I could.
Instant band.
Yeah.
Was it ever any good? I mean, did you ever?
Well, by this point, I'm kind of a little bit of a cocky kid who knows what he likes. And
I
would be the guy who say, okay, here's the band name. I'm going to sing, and we're going to do.
You did the.
My go-to was always "She's About to Move Her" by Sir Douglas Quintet.
Well, it's what 2 chords or 3 maybe?
3 and easy to learn. So I say, here you go. Yeah, I know you haven't heard this, but it's a cool song. We're going to play.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever won. It was
Didn't win the 26 bucks.
But it was the kind of thing where I wanted to play music, but going back to my hometown, a big city, people weren't going to pay attention. It was not easy to be a new band, to get people to check you out. Or so I thought.
But you also had yourself positioned really well because you moved back in with your father at that point, right?
Yeah.
And you moved, I think you were living in his basement for a while, and he was right on Sunset Boulevard there. So you were within walking distance at this point of record stores, clubs, everything, right? I mean, that was...
LA's pretty big, so no.
Oh, okay.
The walking distance in Los Angeles are usually not
That's
two
true.
things together.
Because nobody walks in LA,
No,
right?
as I hear.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Some areas they do, but no. But yes, but I was able to go to a lot of things, But instead of the one club in Davis where I might see the music,
there were a few.
A lot of clubs I could go to.
And you actually did some, which I think you've had a penchant to do your entire career. You met people at the Café de Grand, the famous punk rock place, and ended up being a club DJ there too, which is interesting. Just asking you, because you did radio and then you did club DJs too. What do you think? This is for my own edification more than anything else. What do you think the big difference is between sitting in a room, being on the radio, and being in front of, other than people seeing you, playing records in clubs? What do you think that is?
Have you DJed in clubs?
I have, a little bit.
Okay,
yeah.
so I'd be curious to hear your point.
I still do some.
Okay, yeah, because I do like both. And by the way, I still, whenever I can, if I ever get the chance, I DJ and still DJ in clubs. Still, I DJed on WFMU just a few months ago, and so whenever someone lets me, I still have the hunger for it. But the obvious thing is, when you're DJing, people out there and you can see how they're reacting.
That's
And you play a record, you say they're going to love this, and nobody moves. And
I'm so
breaks
more.
Your heart.
I'm so much more I throw more caution to the wind if I'm playing something, whatever I want to play on the radio. Sure. I throw a lot more caution to the wind when I'm on the radio than in front of people. I'm always I'm thinking a little more about, should I really play this song next? You know,
when you're
when you're live, yeah.
I know. Well, yeah, of course. You play on the radio and you play your favorite
Nobody
new song,
sees you, yeah.
and you assume,
right.
People are driving across Philadelphia and digging this right now. But in the club, you see everybody stop dancing, go to the corner, and
exactly.
talk to their friends. Like, guess that didn't work.
I guess that's the obvious thing. Quickly, you become enamored with, as so many people did in our generation of music and musicians, music lovers. You become enamored. You get turned on to Big Star.
Yeah.
You get turned on to Alex Chilton, and you go to Memphis.
Greyhound bus.
On a Greyhound bus.
2,000 miles.
Right. With the express intent of meeting Alex Chilton. You were going to go meet Alex Chilton. So. Yeah. At this point, I guess you're, 19 years old at this point or something like that, 19, 20.
Yeah.
So great story in the book. You had no idea how to find Alex Chilton. There's no internet, of course, nothing like that. Had no idea how to find him. But you happened to look on the back of a record that Alex Chilton did, and you found an address back there of a studio. Where what was the guy's name?
Actually, a home.
Oh, home, right.
Yeah.
What was his? Who was
Tav Falco.
Tav Falco,
yeah.
Panther Burns, right? And so you write that address down, and that's where you go. You get off the Greyhound bus and you go to this house you've never met. They don't know who you are. Yeah. You're knocking on the door. Tell me about that encounter.
Isn't that crazy? I by the way, if someone did that to me.
By the way, Tav Falco, for folks that don't know, is worth looking into.
Yeah.
Tav Falco, Panther Burns. I really can't describe it. What would you say? I twisted rockabilly.
Shambolic twister.
Very shambolic.
If you like the Cramps, for example, it's not too far from Mark. Yeah, but it's its own thing, and he's
definitely its own thing.
He's a real personality, and he's got a very unique looking character to him.
Look into that.
Yeah.
But so you knock on the door. It's the morning, right? You went straight from the Greyhound bus station to Tav Falco's house.
There was no stop along the way. I mean, 2,000 miles on the bus, eating the occasional
You're getting a cab,
King.
I guess, right?
Good question.
Or did you just walk?
Maybe I took a bus. I'm not sure.
Yeah, right. You figured it out.
Yeah, I didn't have much money.
Never been to Memphis before.
Yeah, never been to Memphis.
And you've probably got $50 in your pocket or something. If that.
A few traveler's checks, as you would have back then.
Traveler's checks, that's right.
Yeah,
so what happens? You knock on the door.
I knock on the door. Now, the reason I knew the address is there was this band, the Panther Burns.
Yeah. No
credits on the record, by the way. So it doesn't even say Alex Chilton on the record. It just has an address. But I'd read in New York Rocker, great.
This is even better, yeah.
Yeah, in New York Rocker, a one-paragraph review saying Alex Chilton's new band. That's all it said. And maybe good record, good noisy rockabilly record featuring Alex Chilton. So that's all I knew. I didn't know what he did in the band. Turns out he doesn't sing in the band. He drums on the record.
Plays drums,
yeah.
Right.
So I didn't know any of this. I just saw the address, and that was all I needed. So I knock on the door. A guy opens the door, and again, nobody knew who Tav Falco was at the time. Now when I tell this story on my shows, people go, yay, Tav Falco.
Yeah.
Of course, no one knew. Right. And I said, my name's Steve. I've come from Los Angeles. I'm trying to find Alex Chilton. And Tav says, well, I love the Memphis accent.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't live here, but I know where he drinks at night.
Right.
So he took me, I'll take you there tonight. So we went to a bar,
right.
The bar where Alex would hold court every night or not hold court and just drink. And,
sure.
And when I tell the story, it makes it sound like Alex was, a sad drunk. He actually wasn't a big drinker. But he liked being social, and he liked being out where people were and meeting people. He was kind of a, very smart, caustic guy. So when a stranger would approach him, because believe me, if somebody took a bus 2,000 miles and knocked on my door, I'd be a little nervous, I had to say.
Well, yeah, of course.
So Alex was very welcoming, and he said, well, sit down, and the implied deal was, as long as you buy me beers and cigarettes, you're welcome to hang out here.
Ask me anything you want.
And so anything with one caveat, and that was, you can ask me about Memphis, life, literature, philosophy.
Wouldn't talk about Big Star. Right.
Big Star was off limits.
Off limits.
Off limits. I remember one question. At one point I said, so Alex, do you think Big Star will make another record? That's what the world needs, another Big Star record.
Yeah.
That was his attitude, because he really felt like this was a giant failure in my life.
Hey, at that time, It really was.
It was. I think a giant failure would be overstating their importance because it didn't even make a blip on the screen.
No blip.
Yeah.
No blip. Until people like you, Paul Westerberg, other folks.
Yeah.
I mean, that our generation of radio people, of musicians, we were the ones that reintroduced Alex Chilton, I think, to the world. I think we should all be very proud of that, by the way. That's kind of cool.
Well, we should all take credit. I mean, and thank goodness, one nice thing about that, and the book sticks to a strict timeline of growing up to 1988 when the Dream Syndicate breaks up, not to jump ahead too much. Yeah. But this is the one time I break the timeline and I follow through my lifetime relationship with Alex.
It's a whole chapter about the Alex
because,
thing.
And I shouldn't give spoilers, but I did see the last Big Star show ever in Brooklyn. And he and I hung out and talked for a long time that night.
Right.
And he had finally that evening embraced the love for Big Star. There were maybe 1,000 people in this hall in Brooklyn going nuts, and you could see he actually, maybe really, because I think it was one of the first times in his life where he just said, "This is great. People like us, and I'm proud of these songs."
Yeah, that's great.
It was horrible.
Yeah, sure.
And then he died a month later.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. You just talked about Alex, and he was a well-known drinker, et cetera.
Who quit? Who quit soon after?
That's true.
Yeah.
I always say
because I hate to paint a picture of Alex.
It's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I was very surprised. I think the most surprising thing, the two things that I took away from the book, your book, that I was really surprised about is I knew you grew up in L.A., but I didn't know, I didn't know how young you were and got into music and such, and your proximity to bands and record stores, et cetera. I thought that was interesting. The second thing is I never knew that you had. I mean, you really became. I guess you were an alcoholic for a while. I mean, you had a bad habit with whiskey and bourbon, and again, I think there's some. Obviously, everybody's got their reasons for doing that, but that was something I really felt to be out of character for you. I don't really have a question about this, but I wonder if you could just speak to how that crept up on you, Steve.
Well, and it did. I wasn't a drinker.
Yeah.
Growing up, or even in my teens, or all these years.
Even when you went off to college.
Even in college, I didn't touch it at all.
Yeah.
I think. Because I did start drinking easily, fifth liter of whiskey every day, and that was
that's a lot of whiskey.
A lot of whiskey.
It sure is. That can't be good for you.
And my main interest at that point shifted towards where can I find a bar to drink more of it. I think a lot of it came, not entirely, but when I started playing with the Dream Syndicate, because we got this. I mean, I talk about it in the book, but I said most bands pay dues, and I paid dues with plenty of bands. We paid it. We went from 0 to 60 in no time.
They sure did.
Our first month of being together, we recorded our first record, played our first sold-out show, and we were the talk of the town right away. And here I am, a record store clerk. I mean, I'm I couldn't at the time accept the fact, well, what sets me apart maybe is that I can write a good song and have a good concept for a band. But to me, I felt like, as many musicians do when they start, a charlatan up there, the imposter syndrome they talk about. And like, well, here I am now playing to sold-out clubs and being told I'm in the hot new band. And I figured, well, they're not coming to see Steve who works at the record store, so I'm going to invent a new Steve.
Yep.
And there are people, reinvention's a big thing. Bob Dylan reinvented.
Sure.
So people do this. But my new Steve was, I'm just going to get as drunk as humanly possible and play that way and be that way. And that's who I'm going to be. Maybe it was a desire to be. And when I say this, I write about in the book, lots of people drank. That it's the 80s, it's rock and roll, it's what people do. And in those times, there wasn't, look at the Replacements and that kind of thing. And back then, if a band did that, you didn't say, you need help.
No,
or,
not at all.
All right, he's rocking. Look at those crazy Replacements.
The Beloved.
It was fun. And so when people had that attitude about us, and I would actually, and I say this, talk about it in the book, and I don't say it like bragging or how cool is this, but I would play Blackout Drunk regularly. And somehow, because I've heard recordings of all these shows, I'd always remember the chords,
I know.
Remember the words, make my way through. But it meant, I think what it did, it's not all negative. It is, because I wouldn't recommend that to anybody, but at the same time, it did allow me to not be self-conscious. It did allow me not to be people pleasing or trying too hard to get over. And there are negatives to that because maybe some people pleasing and trying to get over is a good thing, and that's why bands succeed, or even why bands are beloved. My feeling was, I'm going to get as drunk as I can and do the thing that's going to confound you.
And what kind of drunk were you when you got drunk? What kind of person did you become? Because you're a nice guy. I mean, you've always been very affable and honest, you know, in my dealings with you, and I like you a lot. But I can't imagine you drunk. but what did you get? Yeah, okay, let's do that. Did you get a little surly? Do you think? Did the confidence level raise so much that you became obnoxious? What was it? What did you not like about yourself as a drunk?
Fortunately, I wasn't a mean drunk or an argumentative drunk. I wasn't. I was, by all accounts of people around me, a fun drunk. I think it's amplified the same things we're talking about, where I felt a little bit arrogant about the music I liked and the stuff I was into, was multiplied.
Sure.
So I probably would get you in a corner and tell you what, you know, the same thing I might have told you behind the counter at the record store.
Right.
I didn't go to work drunk, I will say that. But
yeah, that's good. That's good.
But I would, I went to work as a Dream Syndicate frontman drunk, so that's. You know, it's a funny thing, I say this all the time.
That's wild.
About musicians. It's probably the only job on the planet where you can say, okay, my contract is I will only go to work if you have a lot of alcohol at work for me when I get there.
Right, when I get there, yeah.
I'll put in a day's work.
In order to go to work, I need a fifth of... yeah, right.
2 bottles of vodka, a bottle of white wine. It's a funny job.
It is a funny job.
And we work in bars, so that's why I say, you know, when I talk about my little mini rock and roll Babylon part of the book, you know, which is not compared to, you know, Motley Crue books or whatever, but still it's there. We work in bars. We work in places where people are happy for you to drink. We work in places where your office, you know, your office has alcohol, and someone's saying, especially in the 80s, encouraging you, go ahead,
right,
get wild. So I look back on the time thinking it probably freed me up to do certain things, but also it kept me from appreciating music in the way I did when I grew up and the way I have since then.
Right.
It became the focus to be this wild character. And I say until I was 22, for example, I just loved music and my dream was to hear the best record or make the best record. From the time I was 25 till to this day, same thing. But those middle years in there, it became different.
Yeah, a little different.
Yeah, and I'm glad I experienced it, but glad I made it through.
Back to the start of the Dream Syndicate, you and Kendra, the band started actually in the tail end of 1981, and you meet Carl Percoda, the guitarist for Dream Syndicate, original guitarist for Dream Syndicate, one of the 2 guitarists with yourself. I guess lead guitarist. I don't know. Is that what he preferred?
He was more lead. I mean,
more of a lead guy. Yeah. So, tell me your relationship with Carl and how it evolved and how it devolved. What kind of guy was? What kind of guy is Carl, and was he?
He, you know, I had started playing in bands again. I was playing with a couple of sisters who eventually became a band called Wednesday Week, and some people would know them as underground pop. Good band.
Right, Wednesday Week.
But this before that. And they were
named after Undertones song, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I believe so.
I mean, I know the song.
I'm sorry to geek out there.
I'm with you all the way.
I think I'm right on
song.
that.
You might probably, it very well might be. The funny thing about them, and I'm circling around the answers, but they, I love it because they wrote, and at the time sounded like a band called the Shags.
Yeah, right.
Some people might know this very
sure.
unintentionally avant-garde band that just defied any rule.
The outsider, the epitome of the outsider music.
Oh my God.
There, right?
And they and I fell in love with their music because of that.
Yeah.
When they found out later on what the Shags sounded like, they wanted to kill me. They said, "We're not like that."
But, you know who was also a huge Shags fan is Terry from NRBQ.
I thought you were going to say
yeah.
Well, they kind of
they nurtured them along.
They nurtured them, exactly.
I think they put their record out on their label.
Yes.
Terry Adams.
Right. Yeah, Terry Adams and yes, they were big supporters of that.
Right.
And eventually it became quite a cult.
Yes.
But Carl came to this rehearsal because we were looking for a bass player, and Carl just threw an ad in a newspaper, shows up, and Carl is if I describe myself as being cocky, he was 10 times as cocky. And he walked in, he just would tell it like it is. And as I walked him out to his car after the rehearsal, he said, "They're terrible, but I like what you're doing." And that began our thing. And and he was coming a little bit from more of the performance art avant-garde scene in LA. So he was
as was Dennis Duck, the drummer. Right?
As was Dennis Duck,
Right.
right? So we had that kind of art background and less of a kind of a, again, say the people pleasing pop background kind of thing. We were coming more from that. And
but you guys instantly fell in love, right? I mean, you guys were like, I mean, you played guitar all day, and you talk about sessions down in your father's basement. You guys would just play the same song for like 60 minutes straight, and just jam, and it was a connection there.
Yes,
yeah,
and loving that,
and
that was not a thing people wanted to do. So yeah, he became my comrade at arms, my partner, my whatever you want to say. And
did you right away have on a personal level? Did you feel like you connected, and then later things just sort of you guys changed, or things fell apart, or was it more of a musical thing all the time with him?
Well, it's a big part of the story because when I spoke earlier about that period of time when I started drinking more, and it's one thing I really tried to be honest about when I wrote the book is the way people do connect with people when you're young. And I think as we get older, ideally, we talk about things more. Hopefully, if something is wrong, if you and I have a spat at a club one night, and I'll say, next day I'll say, "Dang, what was that all about?
Yeah,
something bugging you? I felt something there."
Sure.
But when you're 22, 23,
you don't do that, right?
And especially when you're 22, 23 in a band that's taken off,
right, ascending,
and things like Carl, who is a very fantastic guitarist, but very odd and strange and unique and mercurial and unlike anybody else. And he wasn't, Eric Clapton. He was Sterling Morrison. He was a noisemaker. And he would get a lot of attention, and I see him getting attention. And I'd say, "Why is he getting attention? I'm the singer-songwriter in this band."
Yeah.
And he would see me getting attention and probably say, "I'm so sick of his stuff."
And you guys started doing things to piss each other off. He started to get more flamboyant and rock starry on stage, and you started to go the opposite direction. But it is the classic. It's happened before. It's the classic tale of frontman, lead guitarist, and the butting of the heads that can create great art, but can also break up a band. Which I'm jumping way ahead here, but I did want to say that. You talked about 1982. This band, the Dream Syndicate, from the tail end of from December of '81 till the first album came out, which was I think Halloween in '82.
Yeah.
So that's 11 months there, 10, 11 months there. You put out a single, first EP. Slash Records picks you up. You put out Days of Wine and Roses. You start to tour. These things happened so fast to the Dream Syndicate.
Yeah.
Almost unprecedented.
Yeah.
Started, and after that, it gets even crazier. You're touring with U2 within a year of formation.
Yeah.
And your first real band. I mean, you were in other bands. I'm not taking away from your other bands, but this is your first really serious band. All four of you. Well, pretty much.
2 nights at the Tower Theater.
Yeah. Then the major labels after Days of Wine and Roses, I'm not the only one who could say that, absolutely love that record so much. It was such a big part of what I was listening to back then. I was still in school, and it was a big, big record. I had it on the Ruby imprint there.
Wow, the original
wore
one.
Wore it out. Mm-hmm. I mean, wore it out. And I'm not the only one. And that's why I think the accolades just came. Pre-replacements, pre-Husker Du. It was really, it seems to me like within the bands that I have like a thing in my head where I have an orbit of bands that I consider my bands, and Dream Syndicate being one of them, and Replacements being one of them, Husker Du being one of them. You guys were really the first ones to make the jump from indie to major label.
Yeah.
It's a heady experience, I'm sure, for a young band to be courted by these major labels.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was crazy, and it was so fast. And when I look back on that, I don't ever remember a feeling of, high fives in the backstage, like, all right, this happened or that happened. It was so fast, we just kept moving forward. We just kept taking things step by step, and always just say yes to that and yes to that. And, U2 wants you to open a U.S. tour right when their record war is taking off and exploding. Sure, we'll do that. Why not? Where's the van? I wish we would have had the chance to kind of step back and say, well, what does that mean to a band like us, and how are we going to deal with that? And the one thing that happened when we got that success, and yes, these big tours and having a label bidding war when we're just barely a starting band. And I have to take a step back. You were still getting to know each other too. I mean, except for you and Kendra, but I mean, you know each other. Right. And also, as you can tell from the time we've known each other, and I was a real student of the history of rock and roll.
Right.
Not just the music, rock critics, rock press, radio, DJs. I loved the whole thing. I loved the whole world of it. I knew what made a cult record and what made a cool underground record and why some things were mainstream and not. And I'd read things and I know why Echo and the Bunnymen's doing this and Tear Up Explodes is doing that and why Joy Division would have done this but New Order's doing that. I mean, all these things fit into my mentality at the time. So I was conscious and I knew what Days of Wine and Roses meant. I was very aware. It was not, when you said the accolades, I knew. And I knew that, I knew what kind of record it was and I knew how it would be received, and it was. And it was exciting.
I bet.
Yeah, but the next thing that happened, all the kind of being courted by the mainstream world, I didn't know what to do with that. That was the thing that didn't fit in my mentality. I've talked to Vicki Peterson recently because we're very good friends still.
Of the Bangles.
Yeah, the Bangles. Right. And Vicki and I have talked about it, and she said, we wanted to be the Beatles. We wanted to be the band they became. We wanted to have #1 records. And I never did.
You never did.
I never did.
You wanted to be Big Star.
I wanted to be that record on the indie, the coolest indie store in town. They put on the top rack because they liked it. And to me, that was cooler than being. So when we sort of entered that world where we were being poised to be that kind of band, it didn't compute. And that's when the band began to fall apart because we had different ideas of what that meant. To Carl, and this is not a bad reaction, to him it meant great because now I can go forward and become the rock star I want to be. He loved UFO. I remember that was a band he really liked.
UFO, Michael Schenker, yeah.
And he said, this is great. We can do what we do, but we can take it and hit the charts. My reaction to all that was, how can I subvert the entire machine and make the darkest record possible? Now that we're going to be heard by more people, I want to make Big Star third. I want to make Tonight's the Night by Neil Young.
Right.
I want to make John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band.
You want to remain cool.
Remain cool. And
it was important to you.
Yeah, and confound people and do that thing that people look back and say, that was really a surprising record. And we both...
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the reality is, at that point, we were no longer the band to make that record because we'd already started to become more proficient. We couldn't be the Shags anymore.
Sure.
For Carl's sake, we could never be what he wanted because we weren't good enough to be UFO.
You weren't UFO, right.
Yet we both had those designs, and it made things very incompatible, and that was the beginning of us falling apart. In 1 year, going from just, we have a manifesto of the band we want to be, to I hate everything you do and I hate everything you do, and sad. And the alcohol I was drinking and whatever things I don't know to this day that he was doing didn't jibe, and ego fed into it.
Sure.
Had the same thing, and you can't. I have no regrets because I'm here with you. I'm playing. I get to tour. I get to do music. I get to make records, and nobody tells me how to make them. I can do what I want. I have freedom. I play with musicians who I love. I met my wife through music, and she's a great drummer, Linda Pittman, and we get to make music together. All these things, it all worked out. But I do look back, and this is a big part of when I wrote the book. The one thing I wish I would have changed is I wish I could go back to that younger self and say, take a second and talk to the people around you. Or at least talk to the people around you. Say, well, how can we make this work? But that's an adult thing. That's something you don't do when you're 22 or 23, or if you do, you're way. So when I say that kind of a thing, I'm sure, Kurt Cobain and Dave Grohl might have said the same thing.
Sure.
Or John Lennon and Paul McCartney, for God's sake, might have said the same thing. I mean, look at that right there, that the communication they didn't have that might have made things different.
Right.
So that's a real takeaway from all of this.
Interestingly, you knowing so much about the behind the scenes part of music, as well as being a big music fan, I wonder if that made a difference too in how you approach these problems that first year of the Dream Syndicate, going into that major label debut, because you had in mind what you wanted to do. You didn't let it organically happen. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, letting it organically happen would have been the right thing to do, but I think we wanted to force certain issues and simultaneously develop and at the same time hold our ground to the band we wanted to be.
Right.
The mission became very confused for a while.
Yes, it was confused.
And we really, we had a mission at the start. It wasn't like we wrote down toppermost to the poppermost or that kind of thing, you know,
Right.
the famous saying. But we did have even down to Kendra and I had a little 4-step manifesto for what made music cool. You know, and I detailed, without going into too much, but there's 4 elements that we said every good record should have these 4 elements, and we knew that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but we lose track of that.
Yeah,
and that whole idea of approaching music does become confused for a few years there.
You mentioned Kendra again. She walked after that U2 tour, I believe, right? Before it. Wow,
weeks before.
Did that? Yeah. How'd you feel about that?
Kendra has a great history of that. She quit our band right as we started getting success, and then started her own band called Opal.
Opal. I loved Opal.
Great band. She quit that band in the middle of a tour opening for Jesus and Mary Chain, and was replaced by a teenage singer named Hope Sandoval, and the band became As He Stars. So now
in the book too, you tell a story. I don't want to tell the whole book here, but you tell a story about a very young Hope Sandoval coming to see Kendra in the Dream Syndicate, right?
Yeah, when you think Hope Sandoval and Kendra, think All About Eve. You know,
that's right. Yeah.
I mean, Hope would come to our soundcheck as a 14-year-old girl. Her mother would bring her to soundchecks, and she idolized Kendra.
Right.
She worshipped her. So when Kendra walked from Opal, she was ready to step in.
Yeah.
And it worked out. Worked out great. But Kendra was not. I mean, Kendra leaving the Dream Syndicate, which she did shortly after Days of Wine and Roses came. We did our first U.S. tour, and she did that, and she realized, touring in a van with a bunch of dudes, even though she's a...
It can be gross, right?
Yeah, not just like, whatever, things you might imagine that means.
Yeah, sure.
Even just down to, that's not the life I want to live.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
I like playing in an arty, weird band. I don't want to be in the machine of any sort. So
Has she read the book, Kendra?
I've got to send it to her.
Oh, she hasn't seen it yet?
I don't, probably not. And she's kind of a hermit living in the woods of California, so she probably has no idea. So
wow, interesting.
Talking to you has reminded me, I do need to send her a copy.
Yeah.
But when she left the band, that was the end of an era. She was in some ways the heart and soul of the band. And again, talking about things I look back and cringe as I wrote it, when Kendra came to me and said, I want to leave the band, I said, okay. I didn't say, Kendra, take a week.
Again,
What's
not
up?
having the maturity to
exactly.
Right, sure.
Okay, you want to quit this band? That's the most happening band?
Go ahead.
We'll get somebody else. There are a bunch of bass players out there.
Yep.
And we took a really great bass player named Dave Provost, who was, whereas Kendra was very amateurish in the perfect way for the band, he was very good. And he came in and made us a different band.
Right. I think that one of my favorite stories in the book, too, because you really painted a picture in my head about you signed with A&M, you decide to get Sandy Pearlman to produce your major label debut, The Medicine Show. You go to San Francisco to record. Again, we're talking about these interband conflicts about what you wanted to be, what you wanted to sound like. At the same time, your drummer, Dennis Duck, steps up and wants to become more part of the process, as well as Carl, right? And
to some extent, yeah.
And this is, I think, the height of your career disillusionment. Maybe worse than the breakup of the band is when I could just picture you wandering around San Francisco half drunk, wondering...
Half.
Yeah, completely. Wondering, what am I doing here? I feel like my band's just slipping away from me. It was very sad, and it should have been very exciting.
Yeah.
And when in 1984, when that album came out, when the Medicine Show finally was released, Medicine Show, your major label debut, comes out in 1984, and I was working at a commercial alternative radio station at the time. It was a huge record for us, WXPN and 97X Cincinnati. And we later had a chance. The first time I'd seen you, as I went to see you guys open for REM at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago. And they recorded that later for a live album. This is not the new Dream Syndicate album live.
Right.
I was there that night. That's when I first met you. Backstage there. They took me backstage. And then we went to the Cubby Bear to see the Replacements play because Let It Be was ready to come out.
With the Del Fuegos.
Yeah, with the Del Fuegos. That was a heck of a night.
What a night.
That was a great night. But anyway, the album came out. It was very important to us, and we loved. We really did love the record.
Great.
I'm not going to say you're dismissive of the album, but you do have reservations about, I think, what it ended up being. Has the benefit of or detriment perhaps of years later, has that changed your opinion about the Medicine Show at all?
Oh, I actually like the record a lot.
Oh, you do? Okay, good.
I did then, and what I didn't like was the process.
Okay.
I hated making it. I hated the process of it. It just dispirited me. It made me miserable.
Yeah.
It left a mark on me. It was not.
It really did.
And that's, to me, that's the centerpiece of the book. Like how
I believe you're right.
That point, that's where things go really dark, and also where I come back from that point. That's kind of the turning point in the book. But it was hellish. It was hellish. And I tried to get across how frustrating that was, and a lot of musicians can relate to that sort of thing. And it was something, as you said earlier, that we were the first band to go through that. We were as you said, we were the first of that scene, of that indie scene, to make the expensive big record for a major label.
Right.
So there was nobody we could talk to.
Right.
We made
no
it in
precedent, right.
We made it in San Francisco, away from home, so we couldn't even talk to our friends. Didn't know what was going on. It was miserable. I do like the record.
Me too.
It's very. I always say I wish there was a record between that one and Days of Wine and Roses to, as I say, show your work, show like how we got there.
Right.
And there's going to be actually, we've couldn't get the rights to it. We've been tried for years to reissue it, and finally this year got the rights back, and we own the record now.
Oh, Medicine Show. Oh, very nice.
And we're going to reissue it next year as a box set with a really good remastering, which the record sorely needs.
It does need that, yeah.
So remastering, and also with a lot of live material around that period to kind of show how that band became, how that sound came about.
Oh, yeah, great.
So I do like quite a bit. And the funny thing about that record is, when it came out in the States, stations like yours were playing. We did well at radio.
It didn't cross over to commercial AOR.
No, it didn't. And it doesn't surprise me, to be honest.
Well, that's what A&M wanted, though, wasn't it?
You know what? I think they were perfectly happy with us being a weird little arty band. I think we kind of surprised them.
Well, that's kind of a bonus, right?
Yeah, it was a good. Yeah. What happened though, which hurt, was that the people who thought we were cool no longer thought we were cool. We were no longer indie cool anymore. The weird thing was, and we got that feeling from everybody who would have liked a record like Days of Wine and Roses,
right,
saying, "Who's this band?" Actually, we reached a new audience, and on the REM tour, it went over pretty well. We went over to Europe for the first time in my life, period, not just as a band. And that record was received as the greatest record ever.
Yeah.
It was over the top, the way Days of Wine and Roses had been in the States.
In the States,
so it was a weird feeling to have a record rejected by the people you cared about most. In my case, again, which wasn't the mainstream, but the people who worked at the record stores. And that broke my heart. And then go to England, and all of a sudden those people there, the same kind of people, love it. And it was a real education for me.
I guess I was one of those folks that liked both of them.
Thank you.
I liked the, the song. It was a band growing up. The songs. I wasn't as in tune to what. I mean, living with it now, I don't like the production of it, but I'm looking forward to replacing my old copy with the new reissue. That should be interesting. Are you going to remix everything? And
well, fortunately these days, because I'll tell you something, I think the original tapes have been. There were two fires: a fire at the studio, the Automat, and then the famous Universal
What can
fire.
you do with what do you have left then of the originals? Then?
The master mixtape, the half-inch, and and you can do a lot these days with that.
Yeah, I bet
you can really. It's amazing how much you can do to bring individual things out. You can essentially remix from.
It's funny. Digital's helping analog now, isn't it?
In a way, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to have a. I keep saying we're going to de-80s it. We're going to take the 80s right out of it.
That's right. That's probably a good idea. Yeah. You mentioned REM. You toured with them, and of course the relationships with, especially with Peter and Mike, have lasted to this day with you. That was another important time, I think, in the Dream Syndicate. But REM did all the right things, didn't they, as a band?
I think so.
And you guys kind of took the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Was that you think that was more of a case of maturity on their end, or personality on your end, or what was it? Why did they go one way, you guys go another?
A lot of things. I mean, they really did. I mean, we
You were very different bands,
very
too.
very
That's true. I mean,
and when
in
people
all
say,
fairness, yeah.
well, why REM this and you guys like, listen to
in all fairness,
listen to my voice, listen to Michael Stipe's voice. I have a voice made to be, an underground figure, and Michael Stipe has a made to sell.
He is a great singer.
He's a great singer that sounds like a voice that, anybody can listen to of any age, of any, background, any kind of, whatever, mainstream, indie, all that. Different bands, but we were coming from the same place, and we were people who had similar
They're our
recollections.
age too, right? Those guys are pretty much, right.
I think Peter's a little older than
Peter is
They're
older.
all a little older than I am.
Okay.
Well, actually, Michael's a little younger. But anyway, one thing that we changed lineups every record. We changed labels every record. We never found a footing. Whereas the great thing about REM is they were in Athens. They were away from a big city, away from corrupting influences. They were united. They decided early on in the genius move to share publishing, to share songwriting credit, to be this force against the world. And they made just a series of great records. And they did, like I say, they did everything right. You can look at most bands from that era. By their own admission, you could talk to the bands you love. Actually, I think Husker Du is one band that did it right also, because they were forced to by being on SST and having to make records, for $500 or whatever. Yeah. But bands like the Replacements and X and the Bangles and are definitely ourselves, we were trying to figure out how to navigate this very weird 80s time where records were made in a different way. REM managed to do it, and not that surprisingly, because Peter Buck is someone like me who understood how things work.
Sure.
And he was the conscious. He's savvy.
Yeah.
He knows that's the way it's going to be, and that's the way it's not going to be.
Right.
And he held his ground. Still does.
Yeah, I bet he still does. Folks, I got to tell you, we were about maybe halfway through this book by Steve, and I have to wrap it here. We could talk. Trust me, man. I could talk to you for another couple hours about the book.
Will.
And hopefully we will at some point. Steve Wynn's new book, I Wouldn't Say It If It Wasn't True, a memoir of life, music, and the Dream Syndicate. And there are many more twists and turns to come in this book that we didn't even get close to covering here. But I want to thank you for writing it. I really, really enjoyed it, and I would encourage anybody to pick it up. And like I said, there's plenty more stories in the second half, and some wonderful pictures in here. Really, really great pictures.
Yeah, pretty fun.
It's very, very nice package overall.
Dug through the vaults and found some good stuff.
SteveWynn.net. You can get information on everything Steve's got going on. And trust me, he's always got something going on. And also, I think there's a link there where you can find out about getting the book. Steve, thank you for your time.
Dan, great talking to you.
I'm Dan Reed from WXPN in Philadelphia. Thanks for watching.